And so that's the first thing we have to know, that things matter. It's a great honor now to introduce someone that could have gone into business, could have done a lot of things, but decided to work for the Jewish people. And I just want to bring upon Jason Grossman. So Jason, thank you for coming to the Thursday Night Schmooze.
Thank you, Rabbi Carfunkel, for having me. I appreciate it. And I just want to make one comment. I want to, my former CJ colleague, Stephen Adler's on the call. So thanks for joining, Stephen. I appreciate it.
Jason, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. Sure. And how you got, or how you started working for CJ. And since we are hit with so many organizations, and sometimes we find that some of them overlap or not. If you can tell us, I went to the website today, but just tell us really what CJ is doing for the Jewish community. But first, yourself and how you got involved with CJ.
No problem. So my name's Jason Grossman. I'm 32 years old and a proud member of the Forest Hill Jewish Center. And I live in the Forest Hill neighborhood. I have been religious for 3.5 years now, and it's the best decision that I ever made, as I like to tell people. A little bit about how I got involved.
I thought picking your rabbi was the best decision. That was the second best decision.
Deciding on the Forest Hill Jewish Center was definitely the best decision. I started off after university working in a member of Parliament's office, both in Toronto and in Ottawa. And then I did a little bit of work for the then finance minister. And I did some outreach work with the Prime Minister's office as well, the former Prime Minister's office. And then in 2015, I left politics. And me and my dad actually started a whiskey company. And I'm hoping one day, when the pandemic is over, we can have many bottles at the Forest Hill Jewish Center that you can all try. And then I was actually sitting at lunch one day, and a friend of mine said to me, "You know what? There's a job at CJ, and CJ stands for the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, and I think you might like it. It gives you your politics and the good feeling of giving back to the Jewish community." So I'll give everyone just a quick introduction about who CJ is. So CJ stands for the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, and we're the advocacy agent on behalf of all of the Jewish federations across the country. CJ represents around 150,000 Jewish people spread out from coast to coast. I wish the other coast, but not yet. And we speak to politicians and government officials about issues of importance to the Jewish community. And we also talk about Israel and the relationship between Canada and Israel. Some of the big files that we've been working on as of recent include anti-Semitism. I want to talk a little bit about our campaign on online hate, because unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of anti-Semitic hate on the internet. So the question is that everyone asks me all the time is, well, what can I do? So I hope to leave you tonight with the answer to that question. And we've also been working on a number of different things on the Israel file, and we're currently we lobby the Ontario government and Canadian government to make sure that they take religious communities into account. So, for example, making sure that that there's 10 people that can go to shul and not 9 when the government changes regulations. So that's another important thing that we've been working on and keeping an eye on.
Okay, so to begin with, so you're talking. Let's just cut off the anti-Semitism. So, is there more? I mean, Jews always live with the sense of like everyone's out to get us. And if there ever was a time in Jewish history, I mean, is it that bad now in 2020? Can one make the case that there's always a little bit of anti-Semitism, but not more than anti-Black or anti-Asian, and got to suck it up. Life isn't perfect. So how do you respond to that?
That's a great question. So unfortunately, when we look at the data year over year, anti-Semitism is unfortunately on the increase. And while there are other forms of hate, recently, this last week, the Toronto District School Board posted statistics on hate crimes for the first time. And while the Jewish community was not the top community, we were in the top in terms of hate incidents. And unfortunately, we've seen too many incidents from the past year into this year. Everything from students having pennies thrown at them, swastikas being drawn, Jewish students to be told to go back home. I'm not quite sure where they're supposed to go because the majority of them are Canadian, as one student said to me. But unfortunately, the online world and the, let's say, call it offline world now are kind of so commingled that we're seeing, unfortunately, especially in schools, a dramatic rise in it, especially with video games. These chat rooms that are on some of these video game sites like Call of Duty and Warcraft, unfortunately, the white supremacists try to radicalize young people on those sites. So we're working with government now to try to come up with some solutions on how we can educate parents and people who are around young people to know what their children are actually viewing on these video game chat rooms.
Can you explain? Because I think some of us grew up with just Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. So what does it mean to get, if you're on just a simple video game, how can anti-Semitism exist on a video game?
So that's a great question. So there's one video game called Call of Duty, which is a video game where people are shooting each other. And there's one that takes place in World War II. And there's Nazi images on the video game site, which we've spoken to video game manufacturers, not just us, but others who are doing the same work in our space. So there's kids that are playing the video games, and then there's also a chat function on the side where basically people can speak to anyone else who is also playing the video game, can chat with them. And unfortunately, that's where we're seeing some of the white supremacy going after young people. So the example that I gave about a student throwing pennies at another student, when the investigation happened, it turned out that somebody on a chat function on one of these video game sites encouraged the student to see if anyone in the school or the administration would do anything for throwing pennies at a Jewish student. And the teacher sent both kids to the principal's office, and then we started kind of helping them untangle the web, which was this case. But unfortunately, there's more and more cases that are out there these days. And then unfortunately, we're seeing more cases online too. If it's okay with everyone, I'm just going to share my screen quickly because I want to show you one of our campaigns that we've been up to. I hope you can. So this is our Not on My Feed campaign. I'll talk a little bit about the campaign after, but I just want to play this video quickly because this video was spread on TikTok and it was liked 21,000 times and shared over 5,000 times before TikTok took this video down. So I'm just going to play this quick video so you can have a look on what anti-Semitism looks like today and some of the forms that we're seeing it in.
The video sharing app TikTok seems to be evolving to be used for far more than just sharing an awkward dance crazes.
A Jewish bunk bed, pretty cleaned out, only burned a couple in it,
I said, here's what happened. Jewish people controlled all the banks. They were all the richest people. They were...
That moment when you're playing with your Jew friend on Fortnite and he asks where we drop him. In a gas chamber.
Turn it up.
Oh, okay.
Desire for Palestine to get that victory over Israel and get their strength back over those filthy Jews. Check this out. It's a crime against humanity to talk about the Holocaust. That's literally what they're saying. Talk to the survivors. It happened. It happened.
I wish it did.
So I'm sorry if that video upset anybody, but you know, the reality is this is what young people are being exposed to on some of these social media platforms. So the next question that I get all the time is, so you've identified a problem for us, so what can we do? So one of the things that we're working on, so we do advocacy to government, and one of the things that we're working on is a 5-part plan to ensure government is aware of what's going on. And here's our plan of what we're asking for. So obviously increasing resources for law enforcement, keeping statistics, which is important for us, developing a multi-pronged public awareness campaign, formalizing the definition of hate and hatred through the Supreme Court, adopting civil remedies to combat online hate, and establishing requirements for platforms to have in order to report hate. So I can send this to Rabbi Carfunkel after, but if you go on the website, notonmyfeed.ca, you will see the video, which I just showed you, and you'll have access to our online hate campaign. And you can fill in your information, and this will send an automated email to your elected official, your local elected official. And it's important that that all elected officials and that we have bipartisan support on this issue. And look, none of us know when the next election is coming, but we know we're in a minority government. So it's important now for all of our community members to act on this, because as you can see, unfortunately with the incidents, and this was probably just about a 2-month sample of some of the incidents that I just showed you in the video. Unfortunately, there's thousands of them on there, and that's what we're asking government to do. I also just wanted to show quickly, if you do come across online hate, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, a website, a blog, you can report it to us at CIJA. If you go to cija.ca/report online hate, you'll get to this online reporting tool. And we also have resources here on how you report online hate directly to Facebook, which this takes you through, and to Instagram as well. And I'm happy to share these with Rabbi Carfunkel after. And I just also wanted to make a plug for our UJ security team, because we deal with the cyber and they deal with the more physical types of threats. So if you do ever need any assistance with physical security, it's the UJ community security team that are the best people to speak to. And there's their information for everyone.
Okay. Wow.
Hold on,
Good
let me.
stuff. Okay, well, thank you. Again, if anyone has any questions, they could put it on the side. Just to continue this discussion. All right, so are there other communities out there that you feel are doing a good job rallying, becoming a larger force than they are? The Hindu community, this community. Is there any community out there that you get the sense that that we can learn from them?
That's a great question. And we actually have a whole team at CIJA, a partnerships team, and we work with the Sikh community, we work with the Black community, we work with the Aboriginal community. And we know that we're never going to be able to solve this problem on our own. And as I hope that you've seen through this presentation, this problem is a lot larger than just the Jewish community. And while it's our role to take a stand on this, we will need others to join us when we do go and ask the government for all those asks that I showed you before. So we are engaging various other communities right now, and it's essential to our work. And if anyone would like to help us do that, we would love to have you join us, because that partnership work is essential and critical to try to address some of these concerns.
Someone just asked me on the chat privately, so you can go to me privately, or everyone says, okay, so what normally happens when kids see this dreck? Do they tell their parents, and do you find that maybe kids will say, well, I don't want to be Jewish if it's too complicated? What's your sense what kids do when they see this type of stuff?
So it's a great question, and we're spending a lot of resources now during COVID educating kids, whether it's public school or private school. The same presentation that I basically gave to everyone today, because if we're not reporting it, then there's no way that these social media platforms are ever going to remove this content. So the number one question I get all the time is like, oh, I'm too busy. I saw something online, I can't find it now, and I'm too busy. And it's like, once you see it, the best thing to do is take a screenshot of it and go to our website, or take a look at those infographics, and you can report it directly to the social media companies. And it's important for the social media companies to see it, and they actually take their data and tie it into some of the police resources too. So when we will go and advocate with other communities for more resources, that can be very helpful as well. So please, please, please report when you see these things online, and encourage your kids to report too, because there's a very small team of us at CIJA, and we need the entire Jewish community to help us.
How does one get the sense of like being critical of the Jewish community and that turning into anti-Semitism? I find that even within our own community, we have disagreements and they get heated. So how do you say that when someone says that something that's nuanced, how do you determine whether that's just a critique? I mean, my rabbi always says, don't judge Judaism by Jews. We acknowledge that we're not perfect. So how do we? So I heard the question. It's nuanced, but what's the difference between being critical of the Jews and being hateful of the Jews? What's the lingo, that nuance?
It's a good question. Unfortunately, we tend to see a lot of Nazi images and white supremacy images when we see Jew hatred, and we saw that in some of the examples
that was a sort of open and shut case, what we saw.
Exactly. So for some of the nuanced cases, the best thing to do would be to use the online reporting tool, and we can take a look at it, because we see these things unfortunately on a daily basis, and we have experts that we can go to as well. But we'll use things like the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, and just so everyone has an idea, I apologize for using acronyms, but IHRA stands for the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, and it's an alliance of 32 countries, including Canada, the United States, a bunch of countries in Europe, and Israel too, that have signed on to a definition of anti-Semitism. And the definition also has illustrative examples with it. So some of the illustrative examples talk about the Holocaust. They talk about the connection between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. So we can use the IHRA definition to determine whether something is or is not anti-Semitic. It's one of the tools we use.
Mm-hmm. Someone just asked me on this very interesting question. First of all, someone commented that if the whole point is to cause hurt or pain, it's probably offensive. If it's to be critical, maybe it's not. But then someone who's doing to me privately, maybe they want to do, maybe you want to do it not privately, but just that very crazy, nauseating thing that you showed us. Has anyone been arrested in that video? Because that's so those people are like, you can find out who they are.
It's a great question. So we can find out who they are. Can you hear me? So the question is, how do we find out who these people are?
Yeah.
So the video with the oven was actually traced back to Montreal, and there's currently an active investigation going on there. So it does happen many times that something that happens online ends up turning into an offline investigation.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned white supremacists, and not a big fan of them. I find that they're not so nuanced. Maybe they are. So let's just speak about that. Are they nuanced, or they just hate us and they're bullies type of things?
So that's a great question. And when we look at the incidents that happen with anti-Semitism, there's a greater number of them which are perpetrated by people that are connected to far-right movements and white supremacy than there are to any other group. And sometimes people say, well, it's not the obvious, people that you would think are anti our community, but we have quite extensive research now into white supremacy, different white supremacist groups that myself and other members of our team, catalog and keep an eye on, and other organizations do this as well that we work with, and we're trying always to keep one step ahead of the groups, but there are a number of groups in Canada and Ontario, unfortunately, that subscribe to white supremacy.
As in terms of, like, I would say our most obvious haters are white supremacists, and let's say militant Arabs. It's funny. Like, in Canada, I've come to have close relationships with many Arabs, and I think that all of us feel like a lot of them are great people, but there's the militant side. And do we see any hate coming from Canada, from, let's say, the militant Arab community?
Not as much that comes from the white supremacy community. I would say that I spend majority of my time focusing on the white supremacy community right now, and just to be clear, unfortunately, anti-Semitism can come from the right. It comes from the left. It comes from other groups that hate us. So it's not only subscribed to the right, it's to the left too. And we've all seen some elected officials in other countries who sit to the left too, that have views which could be described as anti-Semitic.
Right. Someone asked me here, what is the role CEJA plays on university campus? I feel that that's where, I'm going to use the word brainwashing, but that's where a lot of the brainwashing takes place. And a lot of the Jewish students are also scared from just the open hostility.
For sure. And I went to Ryerson in Toronto. So I grew up with Israel Apartheid Week taking place on campus. So we work closely with Hillel and Hillel's across Ontario. And our national team will work with Hillel's across Canada because they're kind of our eyes and ears on the ground. And when situations happen on campus, we'll advise either the local Hillel president at Ryerson or Waterloo or Queens or Western, different strategies and scenarios of how they can best deal with administration and others to move to obviously have an incident reported and then move to have a discussion on it.
Is there a qualitative difference between the anti-Semitism you see from the right and one from the left? Is one more dangerous than the other?
I would say it's equally dangerous, because anytime that you're promoting any type of hate, you have no idea, and especially like the examples that I've showed you online, where something like that can go. And unfortunately, sometimes all it can take is one person that might have some mental health issues or some other issues that listens to some type of message, and then from there goes down a path of radicalization.
If I find personally that if the Jewish community, if we, is there anything that we can do, not in the fighting anti-Semitism, anything proactive we can do? Do you think that if you had to spend, if I gave you $10 million, Jason, would you spend it on forging greater relationships with the Black community, with the Asian community, with the Sikh community, or would you spend it on fight, and get those guys behind bars?
It's a great question. I would probably say that we need to spend resources on a little bit of both. So we need to spend resources on partnerships. We also need to spend resources on making sure that law enforcement are doing their job, and that's why we work so closely with with law enforcement. So, people who are unsure of whether an incident is anti-Semitic, a physical incident, can call, Ryan and the security team at UJA, and have a conversation with them about how you can report a physical incident to the police, and from there charges can be laid. And we have worked on 3 cases. I've been with CJA for 2 years, and we've worked on 3 cases that have seen prosecution. So the law does work, and if we need to,
I know
strengthen
that.
and we will advocate for the law to be, stronger.
I'm going to jump and move to another area. We'll come back to anti-Semitism, but what's going on now in the Senate is pretty wild in terms of the right to decide to take your own life. And obviously it's a very challenging for the Jewish community. I imagine most of the Jewish community is very nervous about this law. I myself, I just want to share with everyone, I myself know of someone that was close with a colleague of mine, another rabbi. The person was healthy, a little bit depressed, and basically he signed away his life, and the hospital took his life, and he spoke to the rabbi the Friday before and saying, I'm feeling down, and that's it. So what is CJA involved in dealing and trying to craft that?
Great question. So we're currently encouraging all senators, and if you would like to come and help us with this, we would be happy to connect you with your senator and MP. We're encouraging the Senate to do what the Senate's job is to do, which is to study legislation and to have in-depth conversations and to reach out to communities like ours to consult more on this issue. Because what we are finding is that, and what we all know is that the more you consult, the better legislation that you can produce. So that's our strategy right now. Things are changing and developing on this on a daily basis. So if you're interested in this, I'll provide Rabbi Carfunkel with my email address after, and we would be happy to connect you into to a campaign, which I'm sure we're going to be engaged in shortly. But our position right now is that more study needs to be done on this legislation, which is what the Senate is supposed to be doing: do in-depth study and talk to different communities and see, what the issues are with a piece of legislation. And we know that this piece of legislation definitely needs to be consulted on.
How long will it sit in the Senate?
So, because the bill in the House and the Senate were not the same, after the bill passes third reading in the Senate, it will actually have to go back to the House of Commons for another vote. So there'll likely be 2 more votes on this piece of legislation, but don't hold me to that, because you never know what the government can do. But that's the general process. So normally with a bill, after the third and final reading in the Senate, it's done. But because there's differences between what the House of Commons passed and what the Senate have passed, it has to go back for another vote.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is not the last. I can tell you that much.
Look, we have what are you have anti-Semitism, we have cybersecurity, and physical security. On the physical security, I've always felt that that Canada, I don't know, maybe should give us a free policeman every Shabbos outside the shul. I mean, especially during Yom Tovim. So is that all something that's in the foreseeable future?
Well, I'll give somebody credit on this call. So I know Stephen Adler worked on the SIP program previous to me, because Steve did a lot of the work that I do. And the SIP program gives synagogues and other places of worship money for cameras and buzzers and physical security instruments. But we're obviously always advocating for more resources and training and other resources at both the provincial and federal level to make sure that our synagogues and our community institutions feel safe. So the answer is yes. But it's complicated.
in terms of sort of the your relationship with Israel, just like we said before, you advocate for Israel. What does that mean? And Israel has so many opinions. I mean, you have there's what's the famous story with Golda Meir and Lyndon Baines Johnson. Joseph will correct me. Joe, you'll correct me. But LBJ says, to Meir, you probably know this as well. I'm the president of 100 million people. And 300 million people. Thank you, Joseph. And Golda Meir says, well, I'm the prime minister of 6 million prime ministers.
So we leave the internal Israeli politics to Israelis because, they're the ones that have to elect and if they so choose to move on from a government at the end of the day. What we focus on is mission. So we take elected officials, heads of media organizations, social media companies to Israel, where they can get an idea on the ground of exactly what's going on, and they can see the reality of Jewish people and Arabs living together. They can see the reality of the situation on the ground. So that's one of obviously we're not doing it now, but after COVID, our plan is to take hopefully more elected officials with us.
Okay, just a question. We're seeing more and more members of our community living below the poverty line, and we are seeing social service agencies' budgets cut. What are we doing to increase the government allocation to our social services like JF&CS?
It's a great question. So the social service agencies are actually one of my files. So I deal with all of our Jewish social service agencies. So we're doing a lot of government advocacy work, and we've pushed our agencies to make sure that they've been able to take advantage of every single government grant and program through the COVID crisis. And we're encouraging them to help as many people as they can. And they've all been stretched to the limit, especially Jewish family and child, because we all know that, the pandemic has had a toll on people's mental health. So it's something that we're going to continue to push for the government to fund our ethnocultural social service agencies, because we know that there's such better results for our community members when there's somebody that has an idea of some of the Jewish traditions and customs, than as opposed to somebody going to the regular social service space in Jewish family and child's case.
Just curious, as what's you've been in the business for a while. Which sort of Gentile politician that you met and you're like, wow, this guy really gets the Jewish people? Is anyone that you've been uber impressed by?
Oh geez. So
well, I would say Moses, not Jesus, but okay.
We don't. I don't know. There's been a number of politicians that I will say have been very supportive to us, and luckily we have bipartisan support, both provincially and federally. I will say this. I worked on the IRA legislation that I was talking about before in 20 different cities across Ontario who have passed IRA in this past year. And the first mayor, Mayor Bevilacqua, the mayor of Vaughan, I have a lot of admiration for him because he decided to be, the first to pass this legislation, and he truly believes in the work that we do, and he's a true community advocate for us. So a shout out to Mayor Bevilacqua from Vaughan.
Wow, amazing. Okay. By the way, I was curious. You said in the beginning that you represent 150,000 people. Why is that so small? Isn't Toronto itself more than 150,000 Jews? So how did you get to that small number?
So there's about 400,000 Jews that live in Canada. There's about 250,000 Jews these are just rough numbers that I'm throwing out, that live in the Greater Toronto area. And then that's the subset which the federations represent.
I don't understand. So you represent 150,000 or 250,000?
So there's 250,000 total Jews, but obviously not everyone will fit into the federation system. So we don't represent every single Jew that is out there, but we represent majority of the Jews who are living in Jewish communities across the country.
So how would it, like, how would I not be represent you? You represent me. I mean, you're fighting for all the Jewish people, or so even the people you're not representing, you're still fighting for.
We do. So you're correct. We do fight for everybody, but we like to say we have a very large tent, but there's some people that unfortunately, sit just outside of our tent.
Okay, fair enough. We mentioned some of the heroes, this mayor. In the past, you've had some famous Holocaust deniers in Canada. Are there any, like, have you made a point of, like, this guy's, I want to say, a superstar, but a negative super? Is there any? I don't get the sense in Canada now with everyone that sort of worked for the Nazi war machine is I think, hopefully dead. Holocaust denier, like, is there any famous villains, or is it a little bit more complicated because there's no famous villains? They're not so easy to find.
So I would say that we're very lucky to live in a country where we have many friends of the community, and that we see bipartisan support on Israel and for our community. And it's something that we strive for every day to make sure that both the left and the right appreciate the issues that are coming forward from the Jewish community, and can see how Israel provides benefit not only to their own citizens but to the world as well. Mm-hmm. And we do that in many different ways. We were working on a project with some Aboriginal communities, just as the Israeli government and the Jewish community has revived languages like Yiddish and Hebrew. So we're trying to pass that knowledge off now to other communities.
Very good. So just I want to end off, if anyone has any questions, now is the last time to get it in. But Jason, I just want to ask you a couple of random questions, sure. Which is, if you can tell me what's the last book you read?
The last book I read, Jordan Peterson's book.
Okay. And just in curious, what's your favorite sport?
I'm a Toronto Maple Leafs fan through and through.
Okay.
So go Leafs, go.
Wow. Go Leafs, go. Anyways, we want to thank you so much. I'm going to unmute everyone so you can thank Jason. Jason, thank you so much. I tell you, it's a great honor because I imagine all of your friends and kudos to them are in the corporate world, or and you've said, you know what, I want to take my corporate flair and bring it to the Jewish people, and that's what we need. We need people working for the Jewish people. And so it's a great honor to have you at the congregation, working for the Jewish people, making a difference. Thank you so much. I'm going to unmute everyone. Unmute yourself. Everyone sort of say goodbye and say thank Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you back at shul soon, and you can all ask me more questions then.
Right.
Thanks so much. It was very interesting.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mike, Eldon, Mordechai, Chani, Sarah, Rhonda, Jeff, Gary, Nathan,